You listen to me. If you ever act without my order again, I will end your career. You'll be writing traffic reports in Ikorodu until you retire." A hand clamped over her mouth, another twisted her wrist until her phone hit the ground. Her back slammed against the car. She struggled, but a knee drove into her stomach, knocking the breath out of her. The whispers came quiet, passed from mouth to mouth like poison in water. A new shipment of girls had arrived in Lagos. Teenagers, some as young as 15. They were to be held in a warehouse by the docks before being ferried out. When Ruka told him, his blood turned to fire. He remembered the story of Hawa, Barca's laugh. All the pieces Ruka had given him about Jagun's empire now made sense. "Girls," he muttered. "Jagun is moving girls." "If it's true, it's our chance to get evidence," Ruka responded. "If it's true, it's our chance to ruin him." The warehouse sat near Apapa's road, its walls streaked with rust. From the outside, it looked dead. Kofi moved through the broken fence, hood covering his face. Every sense screamed caution, but his rage pushed him forward. The moonlight fell through broken panels in thin shafts, gently illuminating some paths. As he walked, his footsteps echoed on the cement floor. "Hello?" His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Anybody here?" Silence. Then, a faint sound, a cry. Kofi stood still. The voice came again, a muffled sob, like a girl trying not to be heard. He followed the sound, weaving through the crates until he saw it. A metal cage at the far end, covered with a tarp. He gently pulled off the cover, but it was empty. The sobbing stopped instantly. The lights snapped on. Shadows exploded into men, rifles raised, pistols cocked. Scarboy stepped from the balcony above, clapping slowly, his laughter filling the space. Well, look who we have here," the ghost, his grin. "You think say you come save girls? Low-budget Batman. You just walk into your grave." Kofi's mind raced. He had been tricked. "Move!" Scarboy shouted. Guns circled him. Men closed in. Kofi dropped into a crouch, scanning every corner, searching for an exit, but they had sealed the place shut. Scarboy pointed his gun at him, spit flying as he yelled. He pulled the trigger. Bang! Kofi dropped low. The bullet ripped past his shoulder. He rolled behind a crate, grabbing a loose pipe off the ground. Shots exploded everywhere, splinters flying as the warehouse filled with smoke and noise. Scarboy roared, "Don't let him out!" Kofi darted between crates, using shadows to shield him, but the noose was closing fast. One man caught him with the butt of a rifle, sending him crashing to the ground. He coughed blood, vision spinning. Scarboy loomed over him, pistol aimed at his skull. "Say goodnight, ghost." Then, the floodlights outside snapped on. "Police, drop your weapons." But just before the shot rang out, chaos erupted. Sirens screamed outside. Floodlights pierced through broken windows. "Police, drop your weapons." Ruka's raid team stormed in through the side entrance, rifles blazing warning shots into the ceiling. Scarboy's men panicked, firing back, confusion turning the warehouse into a storm of bullets and smoke. In the chaos, Kofi dove behind a crate as he sought cover. A hand grabbed him. "Move!" It was Ruka. Her face was tight, her voice urgent. She dragged him through a side door, weaving between panicked gunfire and shouting officers. They bolted into the night, slipping into a waiting keke hidden behind the docks. By the time Scarboy and Seji fought their way outside, choking on smoke, the yard was swarming with police vans. Their own men were being cuffed and shoved into trucks. And the ghost? Gone. Later, in the safe house, Kofi sat against the wall, his lip bleeding, eyes burning with fury. Ruka wiped sweat from her brow, holstering her sidearm. They baited us. The warehouse still stank of smoke and gunpowder. By dawn, whispers of the raid had already spread through Lagos like wildfire. Scarboy set a trap and failed. In Jagun's compound, silence was the most dangerous thing in the room. Scarboy and Seji stood in front of him, heads bowed, sweat dripping down their necks. Jagun sat back in his chair, blunt burning between his fingers, eyes sharp as broken glass. Finally, he spoke. "Explain." Scarboy licked his lips. "Boss, he came. We swear." "Who came?" Jagun cut him off, voice low but venomous. Scarboy hesitated, glancing at Seji. The ghost. The young lion. Kofi." Jagun leaned forward, his gold tooth flashing as he sneered. "The ghost? You mean the boy you threw into the river? You mean the boy whose blood fed fishes?" Seji stammered. "Boss, we no see him face. He wear mask. But the way he move his steps, his fight, it was him. We know it was him." Jagun slammed his fist against the table. The glass of whiskey toppled, spilling across the floor. His roar filled the room. "KNOing is not enough. Show workings." Scarboy flinched. Seji's knees buckled slightly. Jagun stood, pacing like a lion in a cage. "Do you fools understand what you've done? You gave the street a story. Now every rat in Lagos they whisper that Kofi is alive. My empire is built on fear, and you're letting one dead child turn it into laughter." He spun back to them, eyes blazing. "You think it was him? Fine. Then prove it. Bring me his body. Not a rumor, not a shadow, not whispers. His body." He leaned in close to Scarboy until their noses almost touched. "And if you can't," his voice dropped to a deadly whisper, "then your bodies will replace his." The room went silent, heavy with the smell of sweat and smoke. Scarboy swallowed hard, nodding. "We go find Am, boss." Seji added quickly, "We will bring proof." Jagun sank back into his chair, exhaling smoke, his eyes colder than the night. "Good. Because until I see that corpse with my own eyes, Kofi walks, and as long as he walks, none of you sleep." Scarboy and Seji staggered out of the room, hearts pounding, fury mixing with fear. Outside, Scarboy spat on the ground, muttering through clenched teeth. By morning, Lagos was buzzing. It started on the radio. "Breaking report. Last night, a violent clash occurred at a warehouse near Apapa docks. Multiple gang members were arrested in what appears to be a surprise raid by police operatives. By noon, the newspapers had it. Police raid undercovers human trafficking rumors. Underground warehouse burnt, several men in custody. But the headline wasn't what caught the streets. It was the whispers. Conductors shouted it between Danfo stops. Okada riders argued it at junctions. Market women murmured it over baskets of tomatoes. They say the Kofi day alive. Now, if ghost day walk, then Jagun go soon bleed. The city didn't need photographs. It didn't need proof. Just the story was enough. And by evening, the story had grown teeth. Scarboy and Seji could feel the humiliation dripping through every whisper. Scarboy slammed his fist into a wall, knuckles bleeding. "This na insult. Dem they turn us into jokes." Jagun said nothing at first. He sat in his apartment, smoke curling around his head, listening as the radio repeated the raid story. His gold tooth caught the light when he smiled, but it wasn't joy. It was rage, cold and sharp. He stood, dialed his phone. "Get me the CCTV footage," he ordered. By nightfall, the file was delivered, CCTV pulled from dock security. Jagun summoned Scarboy and Seji. They stood in silence as the screen flickered to life. The compound was quiet, too quiet. Only the hum of the generator and the occasional cough of a nervous soldier filled the air. Inside Jagun's inner room, Scarboy and Seji stood stiff, sweat dripping down their temples as the screen flickered to life. The CCTV footage from the warehouse raid had been delivered by one of their contacts at the docks. Jagun leaned forward, his gold tooth catching the glow of the monitor. His face was carved in stone. The grainy footage began, shadows shifting, men moving crates, Scarboy's boys circling like wolves. Then gunfire, floodlights, panic. Jagun's eyes narrowed. He raised a finger. Pause. The screen froze. A figure appeared in the chaos slim, in police uniform, moving with precision. He zoomed in. "Ruka." She barked orders, covering her men as they advanced. Her braids clung to her neck in the sweat of battle, her pistol steady. Jagun's jaw flexed. His eyes burned with recognition. Another figure darting through the smoke, hood pulled low, face hidden by a black mask. He moved with a sharpness, a rhythm Jagun knew in his bones. The roll behind the crate, the way he struck one of Scarboy's men with the pipe, the narrow escape into the shadows. Jagun froze the frame again. The masked figure, half-turned, slipping out of sight with Ruka's hand pulling him away. The room was silent. Finally, Jagun spoke, his voice low, trembling with a rage he could barely contain. "That is Kofi." Seji stammered. "Boss, we no see his face." Jagun slammed his fist against the table, rattling the monitor. "I don't need a face. I know the way that boy moves. I taught him how to move." Scarboy's throat went dry. Jagun leaned back slowly, lighting a blunt smoke curling around his head. He muttered more to himself than to them. "The ghost walks, and the police are feeding him." He picked up his phone and dialed. "Balogun." The voice on the other end was groggy but alert. "Boss Jagun, what's the matter?" Jagun's tone was calm, too calm. "Tell me, how did your officers hear about our operation? Who gave the order for that raid?" There was a pause. Balogun cleared his throat. "Raid? What raid? None of my men received approval. I wasn't aware of any CID operation last night." Jagun's eyes narrowed, a cruel smile tugging at his lips. "No approval," he repeated. "So this Inspector Ruka, she moved without your say-so?" Balogun hesitated. "Ruka? No, she's one of my best. But if she moved on her own. You know how some of these young ones they do, overzealous." Jagun chuckled softly, smoke spilling from his nostrils. "Overzealous or reckless?" Balogun cleared his throat again. "Boss, don't worry. I'll handle it internally. And if any of your boys were arrested, I'll make sure they don't spend another night in custody. By morning, they'll be home." Jagun's eyes glinted. Good man, always reliable. He ended the call, staring at the frozen image on the screen. Ruka dragging the ghost into the shadows. The blunt burned down to ash between his fingers. "Ruka," he whispered. The name tasted like memory. "Like Mariam." Scarboy shifted nervously. "Boss, what now?" Jagun turned slowly, his face twisted with a dark smile. Jagun hadn't slept. The warehouse footage played again and again in his mind. The masked boy who moved like Kofi. The policewoman who pulled him from fire. The name Balogun had dropped casually. Inspector Ruka Adetola. Adetola. Jagun muttered it under his breath like a curse. It was too close. Too familiar. He poured himself a drink, gold tooth glinting in the dim light. "Mariam," he whispered. Her ghost never really left him, but now it had a sister walking, breathing, standing in his way. He picked up his phone. "Balogun." The ACP's voice came groggy but alert. "Boss." Jagun's tone was low, steady. "This Ruka, who is she really? Where's she come from?" Balogun hesitated. "I told you, she's one of my best. No scandals, no debt, no dirt. Clean record." Jagun's jaw clenched. "Everybody get dirt. Dig." By afternoon, Jagun had what he wanted. A thin brown file landed on his desk, copied police records. Balogun had borrowed. He opened it slowly. Name: Inspector Ruka Adetola. Age: 26. Background: Ajigunle born. Graduate of criminology. Known for stubbornness, precision, loyalty to victims. Family: parents deceased. One sister, Mariam Adetola, deceased, age 24. Cause: overdose. Jagun froze. The letters on the page blurred. He saw Mariam's face, laughing, smiling, crying, broken all at once. He had buried her in his memory, locked her behind smoke and money. But here she was again, staring at him through her sister's file. His fist tightened around the paper until it crumpled. "Ruka," he growled. That evening, Scarboy and Seji were summoned again. They entered Jagun's chamber nervously, expecting another storm. But Jagun was calm now. too calm. He leaned back in his chair, blunt, smoldering, eyes glowing like embers. The ghost is not working alone. He has a hand that guides him, a hand that feeds him. He tossed Ruka's file across the table. Scarboy picked it up, confused. Police? Jagun nodded slowly. Not just police. Blood. Mariam's blood. Her sister. Seji swallowed hard. Boss, what do we do? Jagun leaned forward, smiling coldly. What we always do. We cut the hand before it feeds the enemy. Find out where she sleeps, where she prays, who she talks to. I want her life on my table before the ghost realizes what he's about to lose. The room went silent. For the first time, Jagun wasn't just hunting Kofi. He was hunting Ruka. And this time, it wasn't just business. It was personal. The safe house was unusually quiet that night. A single lantern flickered on the wooden table, casting shadows on the peeling walls. Outside, Lagos roared as it always did, sirens in the distance, generators humming, danfos arguing with their horns. But inside, it felt like the world had paused. Kofi sat by the window, mask on the table beside him. His body still ached from the warehouse trap, but it was his mind that carried the heavier wounds. His hands clenched unconsciously, replaying Scarboy's laughter, Seji's sneer, Jagun's shadow. Behind him, Ruka poured water into 2 tin cups. She set one by his elbow and sank into the chair opposite. They drank in silence for a while, the lantern humming faintly. Finally, Kofi broke it. Back at the warehouse. Thanks for pulling me out. Ruka's lips tightened. She looked down at her cup, voice trembling. You are welcome. We are a team, and team members always look out for each other. Kofi's chest tightened. You loved her? Ruka's eyes flicked up, sharp. She was my sister, my baby sister, and I watched her disappear piece by piece until Jagun finished he started. Ruka continued, her voice breaking. Mariam wasn't just my blood, Kofi. She was light. Even when we had nothing, she believed we could survive by love alone. And then Jagun came. He didn't just take her body, he took her spirit. He made her an addict. Tears slipped down her cheek, but her jaw stayed hard. I joined the police thinking I could save her, but by the time I was strong enough, she was gone. Kofi's throat ached. She wasn't gone, not completely. She saved me. Even when she was drowning, she reached out and pulled me out of that river through you. Silence stretched between them, thick with memory. Ruka finally whispered, Do you ever wonder what she would want now? Kofi clenched his fists. She'd want Jagun to pay. No, Ruka shot back, eyes burning. She'd want him buried and forgotten. They sat in silence, the city's noise filling the space between them. Somewhere outside, a dog barked, a car screeched. Life went on. But in that small room, 2 broken souls clung to the same ghost, searching for different ways to set her free. The corridors of the CID building buzzed with their usual noise officers shuffling case files, phones ringing, typewriters clacking in distant corners. But when Ruka entered ACP Balogun's office, the noise seemed to vanish. The air inside was heavy with cigar smoke and the stale scent of whiskey. Balogun sat behind his massive desk, fingers drumming against a thick file, his eyes sharp under sagging lids. Inspector Ruka, he said without looking up. Close the door. She obeyed, standing straight, hands clasped behind her back. Balogun finally looked up, his gaze hard. You led an unauthorized raid last night. Ruka didn't flinch. Sir, intelligence reached me that trafficked girls were being moved through a warehouse near Apapa. I had no time to seek clearance. If I delayed, we would have lost them. Balogun leaned back in his chair, puffing on his cigar, his face unreadable. Do you know what your job is, Inspector? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, he snapped, jabbing the cigar in her direction. Your job is to follow procedure. Chain of command exists for a reason. You don't wake up and raid warehouses because you feel like a hero. Inspector, when my men combed through that warehouse, you and I know they found nothing. Balogun leaned forward, stabbing the desk with his cigar. Nothing. No girls, no evidence. Just a gang shootout, bodies on the floor, and reporters sniffing around like dogs. You dragged the name of this department for nothing. Ruka's jaw clenched, but she didn't look away. The intel was strong. Someone tipped off the traffickers before we got there, or it was just a setup to capture the ghost. Balogun's lip curled. A convenient excuse. You bust into a warehouse with no clearance, no authorization, and you come back empty-handed. You think that makes you look like a hero? It makes you look like a fool. He rose slowly from his chair, his stomach pressing against the edge of the desk, his voice lowered, almost a growl. You listen to me. If you ever act without my order again, I will end your career. You'll be writing traffic reports in Ikorodu until you retire. Do you understand me? Ruka's fists trembled at her sides, nails digging into her palm. Yes, sir. Balogun studied her for a long moment, then leaned back, puffing smoke into the stale air. Good. Now get out of my office. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. Oh, one more thing, Inspector. She paused. Ghost stories don't win cases. They only bury the officers foolish enough to chase them. Ruka didn't reply. She stepped out into the bright corridor, her uniform crisp, but her spirit weighed down. Balogun might have dismissed her, but his warning only proved what she already knew. Someone powerful didn't want the Jagun exposed. The late afternoon sun bled gold across Lagos, but Ruka barely noticed. She walked out of the CID building with her file bag slung over her shoulder, her steps brisk, her jaw tight. Balogun's words still echoed in her head like a hammer. Ghost stories don't win cases. They bury officers foolish enough to chase them. She pushed the thought down, adjusting her pace toward the car park. But what she didn't see were the two men watching from across the street. Scarboy leaned against a keke, chewing gum furiously, his eyes locked on her. Seji sat on the passenger seat, fiddling with his phone, his jaw clenched. There she is, Seji muttered. Scarboy spat into the gutter. Inspector Ruka. Mariam's blood. Jagun was right. Them resemble die. They let her walk ahead, blending into the crowd, but they knew how to stalk without being noticed, weaving between danfos, stepping close when she slowed, vanishing when she turned. Ruka paused at a roadside suya stand, pretending to check her phone, but her instincts stirred. She had been in the job long enough to feel when eyes were on her. She turned slightly. Nothing. Just a man buying bread, a woman dragging her child, two boys laughing over cheap beer. Normal Lagos chaos. They tailed her all the way to the car park. She entered her beat-up Toyota Corolla, tossing her bag in the passenger seat. She hesitated, scanning the mirrors, nothing suspicious. So she drove off. Back at the safe house, Kofi paced restlessly, unaware. Where's Ruka? He asked himself, eyes narrowing. She should have been back by now. He didn't know it yet. But the walls around Ruka were already closing in. Ruka's drive home was tense. She kept checking her mirrors, but the Lagos traffic made it hard to tell who was really behind her. The feeling wouldn't leave. Someone was following. At a red light, she quickly typed a message to Kofi. I think I'm being followed. Please be on a lookout. Don't come to my house. Lay low. She hit send just as the light changed. An Okada stayed 2 cars back the whole way. Its riders wore helmets low, faces hidden. They didn't need to get close. They already knew where she was going. By the time she reached her street, night had fallen. She parked outside her building, scanning the area. Quiet. She stepped out, locked the car, and turned toward the gate. That's when the grab came. A hand clamped over her mouth, another twisted her wrist until her phone hit the ground. Her back slammed against the car. She struggled, but a knee drove into her stomach, knocking the breath out of her. The black SUV parked. Its rear door swung open without a word. They forced her inside. She kicked and thrashed, but the grip on her arms and legs was iron. The door slammed shut. The vehicle sped off. On the ground, her phone screen flickered before going dark. At the safe house, Kofi's phone buzzed. He read the last message she had sent. She was gone. Scarboy and Seji had her. Kofi ran through the city with Ruka's message burning in his mind. By the time he reached her street, it was already too late. Her car was still parked, neighbors whispering about the struggle, but the SUV was gone. On the bonnet, a paper fluttered in the night breeze. He snatched it. If you want to ever see her again, meet us at the dung warehouse. Scarboy and Seji. The words dug into him like knives. He knew rushing in alone was suicide. Jagun wanted him angry, reckless. No, he needed allies, people who hated Jagun enough to fight. But who? He pulled his hood low and melted into the streets, his mind racing. Hours later, in a dingy corner of Mushin, he spotted a familiar face. A man was haggling with a meat seller, his voice hoarse, his shoulders weighed down. It was Malik, the small-time dealer whose sister Hawa had been taken and abused by Jagun's boys. Kofi stepped out of the shadows. Malik. The man turned, and the ground nearly fell beneath him. His eyes widened, disbelief painted across his face. "Koffi," he stammered. "You're supposed to be dead." Kofi pulled back his hood. His face was leaner now, harder. Malik stepped closer, shaking his head. No, this can't be real. They swore you were dead." Kofi chuckled. "They failed, and now they've taken someone else, Ruka, Mariam's sister." Malik's expression darkened. The name Mariam still carried weight in the underworld. "Ruka, she saved me more than once, and now Jagun has her. If I don't move, she might die." Malik's face tightened. "How can I be of help?" Kofi met his gaze. "I remember your sister, Hawa. I saw what they did to her. I saw what it did to you. I stopped Barka and Jide that night, but the system never punished them. Jagun protected them. If you want this city to stop bleeding, then stand with me." Malik's breath shook. He just stared at Kofi, as if weighing whether this was a man or a ghost in front of him. Then he nodded slowly. "You stood for me when no one else did. If you say it's war, then it's war." By night, Malik made calls, whispered to old contacts, and doors began opening. Men who remembered Kofi started showing up. Hustlers Jagun had cheated. Traders Scarboy had extorted. Street boys who once looked up to him. One by one, they arrived at an abandoned warehouse in Ajegunle. Some carried Dane guns, others cutlasses, a few only stones and bottles. But all of them had rage in their eyes. When Kofi finally stood before them, there were over 30 men. The crowd erupted in shouts. The ghost was no longer a story. He was flesh. He was leading them. War drums were beating. And by dawn, Lagos would hear them. The warehouse smelled of oil, sweat, and blood. Rusted iron sheets groaned in the wind outside, and a single generator hummed somewhere in the shadows. Ruka was tied to a steel chair in the center of the room. Her wrists were blistered from rope burns, her cheeks swollen from Scarboy's slap. Every breath stung. But her eyes were still sharp. Jagun entered, flanked by Scarboy and Seji. He walked slowly, his heavy boots echoing against the concrete floor. His gold tooth flashed when he smiled at her, but there was no warmth in it. For a long moment, he just looked at her, studied her. "You know," he said finally, his voice calm, almost soft. "I'm amazed. All this time I was with Mariam, and she never told me she had a sister. Not once. She hid you from me like a treasure." Ruka glared at him. Her lips trembled, but she forced them into silence. Jagun crouched down, so they were face to face. His breath smelled of smoke and whiskey. "She was beautiful, your sister. But beauty doesn't save anyone here. I broke her, over and over, with my hands, with my fists, with my love." He chuckled at his own words. "And she stayed. Every time, begging for a little more." Ruka's eyes watered, but not from pain, from rage. Jagun's tone hardened. "Do you want to know how she really died? Not the fairy tale overdose they told you at the morgue?" Ruka's voice cracked as she spat the words. "Tell me." Jagun stood, pacing slowly. "I was testing something, a new blend, something to keep the girls under control, to make them obedient, sweet, broken. I tried it on Mariam first. She fought it, too strong. But her body couldn't take the overdose. She shook, she bled, she cried out my name. And then she stopped. He turned back to her, his eyes cold, his smile cruel. And do you know what? I didn't feel sorry, not for a second, because in this world, weakness dies, and Mariam was weak. Ruka screamed against the ropes, her whole body straining. Her wrists tore open against the cords, blood trickling down her arms. Tears blurred her sight, but her voice shook the room. You killed her. Jagun leaned close again, his voice a whisper, mocking. No, Inspector. She killed herself the day she chose me. I only gave her what the street always promised. He stepped back, nodding to Scarboy and Seji. Keep her breathing. I want her alive when the ghost walks in here. Let her watch him die before her turn comes. Scarboy smirked. Yes, boss. Seji only nodded, his eyes avoiding Ruka's said. Jagun turned toward the exit, his shadow long against the flickering light. Tonight, we bury two ghosts. Mariam's memory and her sister. The door slammed shut, leaving Ruka gasping, trembling, her rage hotter than her wounds. Jagun thought he had broken her, but all he had done was give her the truth. And that truth would burn him alive. The warehouse had become a fortress. Jagun stood in the center, cigarette smoke curling around him, his eyes scanning the shadows like a general surveying a battlefield. Scarboy and Seji flanked him, nervous energy buzzing between them. Tonight, Jagun said slowly, the ghost comes back to the land of the living, and tonight we bury him for real. He'll come. He's reckless, like his father was. He paced, his boots thudding against the cracked floor. That's why I told you to leave the note. That's why we let him live this long. He thinks he's strong, but he's just a boy chasing revenge. Seji finally spoke, his voice low. So what's the plan, boss? Jagun's smile was cruel. Simple. We bleed him before he even sees us. He snapped his fingers. Two boys rolled in barrels filled with petrol-soaked rags. Another crew set up chains across the side entrances. At the far end, a pickup was parked with its headlights, aimed at the loading bay, ready to blind anyone who came through. Jagun pointed. Scarboy, you take the roof. Rifle. If he comes from above, you cut him down. Done, Scarboy said, gripping his AK tightly. Seji, you handle the ground. Clay bottles with fuel. Any movement, you set the floor on fire. We'll burn the ghost and anyone foolish enough to walk with him. Seji nodded, though his hands trembled slightly. Jagun crouched by the chair where Ruka sat, tied, battered, but still breathing. He grabbed her chin roughly, forcing her to look at him. You, he hissed, are the bait. When he comes in, you scream. You call his name. And when he runs for you, bang, bang. Ruka spat in his face. You'll never win. Jagun wiped the spit with the back of his hand and laughed. You sound just like her. He stood, turning back to his men. Spread out, lights off, guns loaded, no mistakes. The warehouse lights went dark, leaving only the faint hum of the generator and the drip of water from the rusted roof. Jagun's voice carried through the shadows, low and final. The ghost is coming, and when he does, we'll make sure this time he stays dead. The warehouse loomed like a dead giant under the moonlight. Its walls were rusted, its windows broken, its roof patched with scraps of tin. From outside, it looked abandoned, but Kofi and Malik knew better. Dozens of Jagun's men were spread across the compound. Two smoked by the front gate. Another leaned on a barrel, his rifle slung carelessly over his shoulder. A pair of guards patrolled the back fence, boots crunching gravel with each step. Kofi and Malik crouched low behind a stack of broken pallets, eyes fixed on the target. No noise, Kofi whispered. Quick, clean, nobody sees. Malik nodded, pulling the knife from his belt. His face was tight, his breathing slow. They moved like shadows. The first guard never saw it coming. Malik slipped behind him, hand over his mouth, blade sliding across his throat in one silent motion. The body sank without a sound. Malik dragged him into the dark, wiping his blade on the man's shirt. Kofi moved next. A boy leaned against a wall, scrolling through his phone. Koffi slipped up behind him, one arm around his neck, choking the air out of him until his body went limp. He lowered him gently to the ground, eyes hard, no hesitation. One by one, they thinned the outer circle. At the back fence, the two patrolling guards separated briefly at the corner. Koffi used the gap. He threw a stone against the far wall. One guard turned his head too late. Koffi's knife was already under his ribs, driving upward, fast and final. Malik took the second, dragging him into the shadows, covering his mouth until he stopped kicking. They paused, crouched low, listening. The night was still. The men inside the warehouse hadn't noticed a thing. Koffi wiped the sweat from his forehead, his grip tightening on the blade. He looked at Malik. Inside, no mistakes. Ruka's life depends on it. Malik nodded, his face grim. Let's finish this. They slipped closer to the side entrance, bodies hidden in the dark, ready to breach. The lion had entered the cage, and Jagun's trap was about to snap shut. The warehouse was silent when Koffi slipped inside. Every nerve in his body screamed that something was wrong. The air was heavy, the kind of stillness that comes before violence. Malik waited by the door, watching his back, while Koffi moved deeper into the shadows. Then he saw her. Ruka sat tied to a chair in the center of the room, her head drooping forward, her wrists bound tight. A dirty cloth gag covered her mouth. Her chest rose and fell in short, panicked bursts. Kofi's heart pounded, but he forced himself to move slow, step by step, eyes scanning corners, ears tuned to the faint hum of a generator somewhere above. He reached her, crouched low, and pulled the cloth from her mouth. Ruka gasped, sucking in air like someone who had been drowning. "Koffi," she rasped, eyes wide with fear. "Quiet," he whispered, cutting at the rope on her arms. "I've got you." That was when it happened. The lights exploded on. Blinding flood lamps blasted the warehouse, shadows scattering in an instant. From every corner, rifles clicked, boots stamped. Dozens of Jagun's men emerged from the darkness, their guns raised, circling the room like wolves. Above, Scarboy's laugh boomed from the rafters. "Caught you, ghost." Seji stepped out from the left, his grin wide, rifle pointed. "We told you you wouldn't stay dead." And then, from the deepest corner, a slow clap echoed. Jagun walked forward, his dreadlocks falling over his shoulders, his gold tooth glinting in the harsh light. His presence silenced even the men around him. He looked at Koffi like a cat looks at a trapped mouse. "I told them you'd come," Jagun said, voice calm, confident. "You think you're clever, sneaking into my house, trying to play hero, but you're not a lion, boy. You're bait. You came running because of her." He nodded at Ruka, still bound to the chair. Jagun's smile widened. "And just like Mariam, she will be the reason you die." Kofi's hand twitched near his pistol. Men around him cocked their rifles in response. Jagun spread his arms, reveling in his own power. "Look around you, every angle covered, every gun ready. I could kill you now, but where's the poetry in that? No, I want you to know you were never more than a pawn in my city. I built these streets, I buried your parents, I broke Mariam, and tonight I'll break you too." The men laughed, their voices filling the warehouse. But Koffi didn't move. He locked eyes with Jagun, silent, coiled, his rage simmering beneath the surface. Jagun leaned forward, his grin sharp. "Welcome home, Koffi, the bastard who bit the finger that fed him." The laughter of Jagun's men echoed through the warehouse, bouncing off the rusted walls. Ruka's breath came in shallow gasps, her eyes darting between the guns, Koffi and Jagun. But Koffi didn't flinch. He didn't cower. He smiled. The expression cut through the noise, unsettling in its calm. Slowly, Koffi raised his head and locked eyes with Jagun. "I always knew," Koffi said, his voice steady. "I always knew you were the one who killed my parents. I was waiting for the day you'd stand in front of me, so I could take my revenge. And now," he leaned slightly forward, "the opportunity has finally presented itself." The room went silent for a beat. Then Jagun threw his head back and laughed, deep and cruel. You think you're ready for revenge? Jagun's gold tooth glinted in the floodlights as he stepped closer. Boy, I killed your useless father because he bit more than he could chew. He took money from me, tried to cheat me, thought he could outrun me. For months, I hunted him. And when I finally caught him, Jagun's voice dropped to a hiss. I told him his flesh was going to pay for it. He straightened, his grin wide, and it did. Him, his wife, all of it burned. Kofi's jaw locked, but his smile didn't fade. Jagun shook his head mockingly. You? You were just lucky. I was going to end you that night too, but something in me said maybe, just maybe, you could be useful. A stray dog I could sharpen into a weapon. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing. But you were nothing but a waste of investment. A boy too soft to rule, too stubborn to obey. And tonight, I'll bury the mistake I should have burned years ago. Scarboy's laughter broke the silence. Seji smirked, shifting his rifle. The men tightened the circle around Kofi, their weapons gleaming in the harsh light. But still, Kofi didn't move. His smile remained, cold and sharp, his hand hovering near his pistol. Ruka whispered, barely audible, "Don't give him the satisfaction." Jagun straightened, spreading his arms. "So, Ghost, here we are. My empire behind me, your death in front of you." The warehouse was locked in silence after Kofi's words. He stood tall, blood on his face, sweat dripping, but his voice was steady, sharp enough to cut through the tension. "Your empire behind me, your death in front of me. What now?" For the first time, Jagun's grin faltered. Scarboy and Seji froze, their rifles half raised, uncertain. The air felt thick, charged like lightning was about to strike. Then Kofi raised his hands. Before Jagun could process it, gunfire erupted. Crack! A bullet ripped through Seji's kneecap. He collapsed, screaming, clutching his leg as blood pooled beneath him. His rifle clattered to the floor. Another shot split through the air. Scarboy spun, howling as a round tore into his shoulder, knocking him backward into a pile of crates. "Boss! Boss! It's not me!" Scarboy shouted in panic, clutching his wound. Jagun's eyes bulged with rage. "Are you boys mad? How dare you turn on me?" But it wasn't betrayal. It was invasion. While Jagun had been bragging, Kofi's men had already slipped into position, quietly replacing Jagun's guards. The shadows in the rafters were no longer Scarboy's snipers. They were Kofi's sharpshooters. The men at the exits weren't Jagun's. They were ghosts from the streets who owed Kofi their lives. The empire had been stolen from under Jagun's nose. In his confusion, Jagun roared and charged at Kofi, his fists raised. But Kofi was ready. He drove a punch deep into Jagun's left rib. The sound of bone cracking echoed through the warehouse. Jagun gasped, stunned, before another punch smashed into his jaw, sending him tumbling to the ground like a felled tree. Silence. Ruka gasped for air as Kofi cut her free. He pulled her to her feet and shielded her with his body, slowly walking backward, his pistol steady. His voice was cold, almost calm. "You don't deserve my anger, not anymore, but the people out there." He nodded toward the broken doors. "I'll let them be the judge." Jagun coughed blood, spitting curses, his pride cracking faster than his ribs. "Kofi, you bastard! You think this is justice? You think you can walk away from me?" And then they came. The warehouse doors creaked open, one figure, then two, then dozens. Mothers in faded wrappers, gripping rusted cutlasses. Fathers with hoes, spanners and iron rods. Young boys carrying broken bottles. Old men with machetes sharpened by years of survival. Children throwing stones, eyes wide with fury. It was the streets, the very people Jagun had starved, taxed, beaten, and buried under fear. They walked slowly at first, their footsteps echoing, then faster, louder, until their voices filled the warehouse. "Jagun, murderer, thief of children." Jagun's bravado cracked. He scrambled to his knees, spitting, waving his arms. "Stay back! Don't touch me! I am Jagun, king of these streets. You hear me? I will end you all." His hand darted under his shirt, pulling a pistol. He fired wildly into the crowd. 1 shot, 2 shots, 3, but the mob didn't stop. For every step back he forced, 10 more pressed forward. Scarboy groaned from the floor, too weak to move. Seji sobbed, his leg shattered, begging for help. But no one listened. Koffi turned his back. He lifted Ruka into his arms, her head against his shoulder, and walked out slowly, each step heavy, final. Behind him, the warehouse erupted. Screams, shouts, the sound of wood against flesh, metal against bone. Jagun's voice rose above the chaos, cursing, threatening, begging all at once. "Don't touch me, I am the street, I am Jag." His words drowned in the roar of the mob. Koffi didn't look back. Outside, the night air was thick with smoke and echoes of vengeance. He carried Ruka past the burning barrels, past the bodies, past the fear that once ruled the city. Behind him, the warehouse became Jagun's tomb. All that remained were screams, fading into silence. The lion walked away. The ghost lived. And Jagun's empire was no more. Morning came heavy over Lagos. The warehouse still reeked of smoke and blood, but the mob had already dispersed, leaving only silence and ash where Jagun once stood. His empire, once feared, had fallen in one night. Scarboy and Seji did not die with him. They were found crawling from the back of the warehouse, half dead, begging for mercy. The same people they once terrorized now dragged them through the streets, their broken bodies a spectacle. But instead of mob justice, the police took them not because of law, but because Kofi and Ruka insisted. At first, everyone thought the silence would return. The system would cover it up like always. But this time, Ruka pushed. She stood in court as Scarboy and Seji confessed to everything. The extortions, the drug runs, the kidnappings, the human trafficking, even the arson that took Kofi's parents. Their words spilled like sewage, naming names higher than anyone expected. Politicians, businessmen, police officers, and finally Balogun. The ACP who once shielded Jagun. Kofi stood outside the courthouse, watching as Scarboy and Seji were led away in chains. The sight didn't bring joy, only a cold sense of finality. Ruka joined him, her arms still in bandages. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. "It's over." Kofi shook his head. "Not over, just beginning. The streets, they'll always find another Jagun." She studied him for a long moment. "And what about you? What will you be?" Kofi looked out at the city. Horns blaring, vendors shouting, children running barefoot in the dust. His voice was low, certain. "I'll be the reminder that ghosts don't die easy, that nobody owns these streets but the people." Ruka nodded, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. For the first time, she believed it.